In the modern age, fraud is becoming increasingly prominent, with fraudsters finding ever-increasing ways to scam people. But it is possible to create a profile which allows organizations and businesses to identify fraudsters easier. Joining us now to share his views is Dean Friedman, Director of Forensics at KPMG. Dean, thanks so much for your time today. But when I think of a fraudster, maybe Dave, I think dark sunglasses, a trench coat and a hat, and someone who meets up with other people in alleys with briefcases. Not so, David?
Yeah, that's what I do in my spare time.
Yeah, good morning. And unfortunately, it's not always like that. And I think that's one of the points that we make, is that the fraudster are right in front of our eyes in an organization. You know, they trusted the employees. They've been there for long. We entrust them with the assets of the organization. And our general trust is shareholders. And you don't see a mask.
So what is the profile of the typical fraudster, if there is such a thing?
Yeah, I think it's a tale of two ends in the end. You know, we've done a study since 2007. We repeated it in 2011, and now again. And some of the aspects remain the same. You know, they're typically 36 to 45 years of age. It's been mostly with the organization for more than 6 years, being trusted employees, acting against the organization and so forth. But then there are differences, and these differences change as the environment changes. And with the modern world, you know, we're looking at technological advances that sort of giving a different capability to the fraudsters and a different attribute to them. So the point is, at the end of the day, there's no consistent profile that would give us a predictive capability to see them at the end of the day or in future.
It doesn't sound then as if your profile is much use, because think of the number of people who are working in a company for 5 or 6 years, who have access to the financial systems and so on, and they're different depending on the circumstances. So is this helpful?
Yeah, I think what we try and tell organizations and clients is that you have to look at the 3 fraud drivers, which is opportunity, the motive, and so forth. And then also to look at capabilities around it and circumstances. And how the environment changes gives you a good idea of where your next threat comes from, because we would identify them by behavior.
You mentioned, you just touched on some of the characteristics, and on TV now we've got a graph which has some of the pointers that you alluded to earlier with regard to the characteristics of a typical fraudster. What sticks or strikes me the most is the fact that a typical fraudster holds a managerial or an executive position. This is someone who's no doubt in a trusting position and in a leadership position at an organization. Is that, I mean, that's a shocker to me, but I take it in the industry not too much.
Yeah. Look, I need to give some context to the findings that generated that result. Firstly, we looked at 596 cases that KPMG investigated, plus we had access to 42 investigations leaders around the world who gave us their insights and views on it. So the number that you see there, as far as senior managers and executives are concerned, are work that has been passed on to KPMG and is not necessarily reflective of the general view of fraudsters in the world.
How bad is the problem?
It's a significant threat to the environment, and the problem is being exacerbated by a number of things. Firstly, we found that we get more and more corruption in the commission of otherwise pure fraud or theft, and I think one of the reasons for that is in an attempt to overcome controls. Secondly, we've seen consistently since 2007 through 2011 an increase in the collusion between fraudsters. And then, you know, in the modern world with technology and interconnectedness and the net and cyber fraud becoming a significant environment, you know, there's a fairly lethal cocktail brewing between those 3 concepts. And those are the major changes. And those are the, you know, if you asked the question earlier on, you know, what would be the value of this? And I think this is where it sits, because this is what we see is happening currently, and what we expect is going to happen in future, and that is not a good picture to see.
How much do businesses lose per year with regard to fraud?
That's a difficult question. You're almost asking me how long a piece of string can be. I mean,
but it's a long piece of string, isn't it? There's a lot of money involved.
Yeah, we talk. You get lots of estimates being done. But you need to understand, of course, that all businesses are not disclosing the full losses and varying in different parts of the world. you have less transparency as far as that is concerned. So it's difficult to estimate it. Our experience is coming out of here is that 16% of the frauds where collusion took place was in value over than $5 million. Where people went solo, it was about 9%. So there's a metric that one can look at. But to give you a full or a complete estimate of fraud losses around the world is fairly difficult.
It's clearly a big issue. What about governance? Because there's always talk of improved governance, improved controls, risk management. There's no shortage of that. On the other hand, if you've got someone who wants to commit a crime and has access and maybe collusion is necessary, all the best governance in the world is not going to stop you, is it?
Yeah, I think the question turns pretty much around the opportunity. Once the opportunity is spotted, and the fraudster has motivation and can rationalize it, they would ask the question whether they have the capability to do it, and if they have the capability to do it, the motivation, the rationalization would propel them through the opportunity.
Just on that, I think that's also linked, you mentioned the governance issue there, but obviously fraudsters have some kind of motivating factors. There's greed, there's, a need for power as well, and you can't really control that given governance. So can you, Dave?
I don't think there's anything you can do. I mean, governance helps the good guys prove that they're good. It doesn't stop the bad guys.
Yeah, and the question is where your governance is pitched. If your governance around fraud, sitting in your controls and your values and your ethical environment doesn't match the threat, the governance really is not effective. And that's one of the things that we're saying is that when we look at cybercrime and collusion, you actually need to extend your fraud defenses a little bit beyond the confines of the company structure.